Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
And this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast.
Good morning, my lovely friend. How are you today? It is spectacular here in Melbourne on this beautiful sunny morning. And I'm joined by the most wonderful, bestest person in the whole wide world, Dr. Mary Barson. Hello, my gorgeous friend. How are you today?
I'm lovely. Thank you so much. I'm good. Lovely, Lucy. I am doing well. I'm feeling well today, and reflecting on the fact that I'm feeling well with gratitude today because it's coming up to World Diabetes Day on November 14th. And this is a topic extremely close to my heart because I am just one of those people who is extremely genetically primed to develop type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. I've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is, well in control and in remission with lifestyle changes, which is great. I had gestational diabetes with both my kiddos, needed some injectable insulin with my most recent baby, who's now 2 years old. And both my parents have got type 2 diabetes. And that there is a time when I would have thought that it would be inevitable that I would also develop type 2 diabetes, and I really don't want to because it is an incredibly serious condition. But I definitely don't feel that that is the case now at all. I think my most recent blood tests, they were great, I had a HbA1c of 5.1 and my insulin was 3 and things were all really, really good. So I'm metabolically well despite my strong genetic loading for developing type 2 diabetes. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think that it is a great time to talk about all things diabetes in this auspicious time leading up to World Diabetes Day.
Absolutely. So I thought I'd start with just maybe describing a few of the different types of diabetes, because when we talk about diabetes, there's actually separate diseases. So the first one is what's known as type 1 diabetes. It used to be called juvenile diabetes. That's actually a misnomer. It's type 1 diabetes, most commonly developed in childhood, and it's an autoimmune condition. So the antibodies attack the pancreas stops making insulin, and blood sugar rises. And, people present, or kids usually present, quite unwell. It's not that's your first sign, is you present really unwell. So they've lost some weight, they're very thirsty, they're drinking, they vomiting, and it's like, what's going on? And people sometimes think they've got maybe some gastro, and it doesn't get better, and they become quite unwell, and it's really, often an emergency situation. Yeah. Not always, but sometimes.
Seen quite a few kids with that first presentation. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And it's pretty harrowing, I think, for families, and it's a whole thing in itself, to manage. So that's certainly one sort. The next sort is what is commonly known as type 2 diabetes, which is the lion's share of diabetes. That when we talk about diabetes, that's what a lot of people are referring to. It's a completely separate disease process to type 1 diabetes. They're completely different.
It's confusing. They even share the same name.
Would be nice actually if they had they should really have different names.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway.
But they are so different. But yes.
We need to get for any of you who are Australian, you'll know Jimmy Rees as a comedian who does the thing where he decides, the person that decided the packaging. Have you ever seen that? And it's he'll go, who decides the packaging of strawberries? And they go, oh, well, we'll give them plastic packaging with cling wrap labels, cling wrap topping. And then he'll go, great. And that's the same packaging then for raspberries. No, don't be stupid. We do, clear packaging with hard labels for those ones. Oh, okay then. And so that's the same packaging we'll then use for apples. No, Jason, don't be ridiculous. We use paper bags for apples. And it's a bit like whoever decided that named some of our conditions. Why don't we call them all diabetes? Yes, Jason, that's a good idea. No, Jason, that was a stupid idea. So anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking to, please Google Jimmy Rees. He's very funny.
Yes, indeed. What other types are there? We've got tell us more about type 2 diabetes, actually. I think it deserves a bit more time.
Again, type 2 diabetes, and there's a few little subtypes that will fall into this, which are probably on the scope of here, where we've got things like MODY and type kind of 3A and really more specialised sort of versions. But in general, type 2 diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance, and it usually will have hyperinsulinemia, so high levels of insulin at the start for a long time, often decades, and then if left unchecked or if managed in the traditional way, it will often result in burnout of the pancreas and then very low levels of insulin. And we'll come back to type 2 diabetes, but I think just to finish off, the third type is, as you've mentioned, gestational diabetes, which is really an extension. It's sort of like, it's very similar to type 2 diabetes, but it just happens in pregnancy, and it's related very much to the levels of progesterone in our blood during pregnancy. And we know that progesterone is one of our normal female hormones that in pregnancy is designed to, help gestate the baby. And as part of that, it makes us, all women, insulin resistant, which is a useful thing because insulin resistance means we store body fat.
Helps the baby grow. Yep. It's a growth factor.
Helps the baby grow.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Keeps, supply for breastfeeding, for, again, thinking about times where we didn't have refrigerators, where we had to go and hunt and gather our food. It was very, very useful. Not quite so useful now.
Yes.
I tell you what is I don't know if you have any of this, Mares, but I have what I like to sort of refer to as a little bit of pregnancy trauma around the insulin resistance that I experienced, not knowing anything about it back 25 years ago. And in fact, 24 years ago today, November the 12th, is my eldest daughter's birthday. So 24 years ago.
Happy birthday, lovely one.
I know. And as part of that, I put on 32 kilos in my pregnancy.
That was the insulin resistance of pregnancy. Yep.
It was. And, my obstetrician gave really helpful advice of, don't put on too much weight. It's like, mate, I'm not doing anything differently. In fact, if anything, I was really, really, particularly the first pregnancy where I was really pedantic. I was off to pregnancy exercise class, which was called Preggy Bellies. I was eating well, all of the things. And basically I just gained weight, not just around my belly either. I'd like to say it was all around my belly. It wasn't. It was also around my bottom.
Yeah. And it was a traumatic experience, especially when you didn't understand why, and it wasn't explained to you why that insulin resistant state that happens in the last, certainly the last trimester of pregnancy is normal, and women will gain weight normally. I had my experience with my second pregnancy when I was officially diagnosed with gestational diabetes with my second pregnancy. Looking back at my blood tests, I can see that I had it with my first one, but that was when the guidelines were a little bit different. Well, according to current guidelines, I would have had it with my first pregnancy, but I wasn't diagnosed because the guidelines were different back then. I wore a continuous glucose monitor throughout most of that pregnancy because I wanted to, have nice steady blood sugars despite having gestational diabetes. And that gave me this kind of immediate feedback, which I think really helped me understand what was happening in my body and helped me avoid that, which was good. I did gain some weight because that's normal and natural, but not heaps and heaps and heaps.
Yeah. I often now think, wow. And again, I wasn't a low carbitarian back then. I was eating sandwiches and pasta, probably pasta galore, I'd say, because, I was tired and, it's easy to cook. So, I look back now and think, well, I can see why I stacked on 35 kilos or 32 kilos. The advice my obstetrician gave me of don't put on too much weight, like that was so unhelpful. It would have been nice to know now what I know then. which was that, again, you don't have to do a ketogenic diet in pregnancy or anything like that, but to have, maybe not eaten breakfast cereal, 2 sandwiches for lunch and pasta for tea every day.
Yeah, focus on your protein and your real food. That's right. Could have been helpful. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about CGMs then, because they're super popular. Wearable technology is the new black, so to speak.
It's a green rainbow.
What are your thoughts on the MERS? Useful or not useful?
I think that they are really helpful. To sort of lean into technology can be such a useful tool. Let's use this with the example of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And as you alluded to, Lucy, lots of people have got insulin resistance for up to, 10 plus years before they might be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And if their insulin resistance had been diagnosed earlier, there's this 10 years in which they could have potentially had the right advice and to be able to turn their health around and to not get type 2 diabetes. But even once people have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, there is a lot you can do with your lifestyle to turn it around. You can reverse it in many cases, and you can certainly stop it from progressing and progressing and progressing and progressing with the right lifestyle changes. And it's complex, but there are some simple aspects to it that if you reduce the amount of sugar and the amount of starch that you eat and prioritize your real food, then you're going to, your body's going to need to make less insulin, which is going to help heal and rebalance your insulin signaling within your body, within your cells. It's really complex. Like, insulin resistance is a complex metabolic disorder. But it is very true that the less sugar and starch you have, the more balanced your insulin can be. So, and you can talk to someone who's perhaps, it's sitting in front of me in the GP consult room, and let's say, for argument's sake, that it's a person who's got a brand new diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, and they are motivated, they are frightened, they do not want this, because this is serious. Like, this is not at all trivial.
Yeah, and I think it's worth highlighting that because, in days gone by, people often referred to type 2 diabetes as having a touch of sugar. I've just got a touch of sugar, which is like, there is no such thing as a touch of sugar. It is a serious, serious condition. And in fact, I think we just looked up some stats. It is the leading cause of kidney failure in Australia. It's one of the leading causes of blindness. And the thing in particular that I think is terrible about being blind is that it comes, towards the end of your life when you're frail. So perhaps your vision, maybe you can't do all the things that you used to do. And so your vision's super important. It allows you to do things, to watch TV, to read books, to connect with your friends, to drive. And once it's gone, it's gone. Like, that's it. All of those things are taken away. So it's a really massive, I guess, just burden on your health span if you don't have your vision.
Absolutely. And bringing it back to that beautiful person sitting in front of me in the doctor's office with their new diagnosis, this beautiful person, they don't want to lose their sight by the time they're 70. They don't want to have their foot amputated. They don't want to lose their kidney function and spend their life on dialysis. They don't want these things. However, human brains, being what they are, it is difficult for us to grasp long-term consequences for behaviour change. Like, we can want to, look at reducing our sugar, reducing our starch, making this work for us. How can I have a beautiful, joyful life by eating and eat less sugar? You want that, but the sort of the consequence of in 40 years' time, I'll be in dire straits if I don't do this is not easy for our brains to grasp. And if you're not finding that easy to grasp, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you're human. But bring in technology, chuck a CGM, a little needle into your arm. It's a tiny little needle, doesn't it? Well, it has a tiny bit, but hardly at all. Very comfy. And it gives you this immediate feedback of what your blood sugar is doing. Not your blood insulin, but your blood sugar. And it brings all of the consequences, if you like, of your, what you eat and how you move and how you sleep immediately into the short-term future right now. And so you can see that you eat the breakfast cereal and your blood sugar spikes. That is immediately helpful, useful information to say, right, well, next time I will have hemp seed porridge for breakfast or eggs or some leftover dinner. And that it empowers people to see, to work with their body, and also I think also it can empower people to show how movement is another aspect of it, that, if you see your blood sugars rising, have a glass of water and just move your body a little bit, and you could use your body to bring your blood sugars down. Like, that is also really, really helpful and powerful. And I think that they're great, and I use them quite a lot in my patients. They're not necessarily cheap, especially outside of that diagnosis of diabetes, of type 1 diabetes in particular. It's where they're subsidised, but they're helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. So, we've spoken a lot about behaviour change and the various techniques that you can employ to do the thing that you kind of know you want to do. So, as we go, the helpful thing. What are the things that we can do to ensure that we are more likely to do the helpful thing? Certainly, accountability and feedback are one of the most powerful external drivers that you can employ. And that's where this CGM comes in. So not only can you have feedback immediately, again, depending on what you're doing and who you're working with, you can also share CGM results. So I've certainly had patients where they've shared their CGM results with me. And so it's like this little...
Ooh, you could log in every day and check what's happening.
Maybe. Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely. Or they would come and we'd... Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't see them unless they consent. But they would also come with their results, and then we'd look at them together, and then we go, oh, okay, tell me, and my question is never, judging is never helpful, but it's more like, tell me about what's going on here.
Be curious.
So, and the other thing that I think a CGM can be helpful for is to see if you get any blood glucose rises with stress. And we certainly see that in people with type 1 diabetes, that it's really common. Sometimes people with type 2 diabetes will still show a glucose rise with stress. And I guess the other thing where they will get a glucose rise that isn't concerning is with exercise. So, Mez, can you explain to our listeners why we get a blood glucose rise on a CGM with exercise?
It's because we get mobilisation of the glycogen stores, so mobilisation of the energy that we store. So our body can store energy in two main ways. We can store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in our liver and in our muscles, and then we store energy as fat in our hopefully mostly in our fat tissues, but sometimes also packed in around our internal organs, which is not great. And when we exercise, we get this sort of mobilisation of the glycogen that can cause these transient spikes.
Absolutely. And the other thing to note is that the CGMs are recording, it's called interstitial levels. So your interstitium is the little sort of bit between your cells. It's not actually your blood. So your blood is contained within your arteries and your arterioles and your veins and your venules.
Yeah.
Venules, yeah. We never use that word.
Don't use it very much.
Anyway, little vein. No. Anyway, so it's an approximation. So and again, that's something to always be mindful of for anybody using a CGM, to note that it's an approximation. It's not necessarily absolute. But the other word I would like to give a little cautionary tale again, I guess, around reassurance of CGMs. So CGMs are really useful when you can see what is causing your levels to go high. So you can go, oh my God, I ate that bowl of rice and wow, look at my blood glucose, it's 12. And then 2 hours later, it's now 4 and I feel terrible and what's going on. So that's really useful. But I've also had situations where I know that people's pancreases are really, really good. So what happens is that, and this is where we've done in the past, glucose tolerance test. So glucose tolerance test is where you go to the pathology place, you go fasted, you they do a blood test, you drink the sugary drink, and then at 1 hour and 2 hours, they'll take separate blood test results. And you can combine those tests with an insulin level, and I think they're super effective. So I've seen plenty of results where the blood glucose is almost rock steady. Like, in fact, one lady I can remember, her blood glucose at 0, 1 and 2 hours were both all in the fives.
And this is after I have 75 grams of glucose. So it's a big load of glucose that they challenge you with.
Yeah. It's like so it's like she's just had 600 mils of Coke and blood glucose completely normal. And you go, oh, awesome. And then her insulin levels came, and her insulin levels were high in the 200s. So a normal insulin curve really shouldn't go around over 45. And again, these are Australian units. So ideally, fasting insulin should be roughly, and again, there's no perfect, but roughly under 10. 1 hour in response to this 75 gram load should be roughly about 45, and then it should be coming down to about 30. And if that's a normal metabolically flexible person's response. This lady's was, her fasting was about 20, her 1 hour was 220, and her 2 hour was about 260. And it's like, oh, so interesting. So again, she's highly insulin resistant, but normoglycemic.
So with her, a CGM could be potentially falsely reassuring, which I think is, you got to take it in that the data, within the context of, of what it's actually telling you. And blood sugar is a bit downstream, isn't it? Like you could be developing insulin resistance and all of the problems associated with that, the problems associated with high insulin, weight gain, or increased inflammation, all kinds of things. But your hardworking pancreas is still able to keep, the wheels on this rickety car and keep the blood sugar under control. Whereas it
absolutely
won't be able to do that forever, but it's doing it for now. And so it's not everything. A CGM is not everything.
No, and I think that's really important for us to remind our lovely listeners is that insulin resistance does precede type 2 diabetes, often, as you mentioned earlier, a decade beforehand. You've got plenty of time to turn that ship around. Symptoms, if you're thinking, well, how do I know if I've got insulin resistance? So we know that if you're storing your body fat around your middle, then that's often a sign of insulin resistance. If you've been diagnosed with fatty liver disease and you're not a heavy drinker, it's probably insulin resistance. If you've ever had gestational diabetes, you're probably you're more likely to be insulin resistant. If you've got lots of skin tags, then that's a sign of insulin resistance. And then a weird sign, and I don't know the pathogenesis of this, but people can get something called acanthosis nigricans, which is sort of dark, like pigmentation of the skin, under your arms, around your neck, some people on your forehead, sometimes on your forearms. And it's like a change. It's also a change in the skin texture. It's sort of a velvety texture. So that's quite a late sign. So again, plenty of time to turn the ship around.
Yes. And how do you turn the ship around? I mean, all the guidelines say you start with lifestyle. Start with lifestyle. That's it. But yes. I don't know. I didn't learn much about how to help people change their lifestyle in medical school. So it's easy, I think, in the medical profession to just play lip service to the change your lifestyle. But what's actually helpful here? Lovely Lucy.
Yeah. So I think there's two things to note. One is, education. So people need to know. And look, to be honest, most people know some of the things they should be doing. Most people know it's not helpful to sit all day watching television, that sort of stuff. So we do need to know what to do, but then we actually need to do it. So the knowledge is step one, and step two is the implementation. So the knowledge, again, we talk about the 4 S's or sometimes the 6 S's.
Yeah, that's right.
Depending on what day of the week it is. They're really, really fundamental for improving insulin resistance. So, if we start with the number one S, which is our sustenance, and again, low carb is a powerful way to give your pancreas, it makes sense. You give your pancreas a rest. It doesn't have to work so hard. You reduce your fasting, you reduce your insulin levels, opening access to your stored fat. You empty your organs of fat, empty your liver out, empty your pancreas out. Your body's so much happier, so much happier. So number one, sustenance. What's number two, Maz?
I always two that vie for my attention. I'm going to go with number two is stress.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
absolutely. And again, I was just going to say, as we saw, and you can see this particularly if you've ever seen a CGM on a person with type 1 diabetes, you see the profound effect on their blood glucose that stress has. We know theoretically, we all learnt this in medical school, that cortisol increases glucose, but it's like we forget about it actually in the real world.
Yep, that's what I tell myself when something I can feel myself getting stressed. I'm like, this is not worth the rise in my blood glucose. Just take a few centering breaths. It's very helpful for me to remember how important stress management is.
Absolutely. And people... Again, we've said this a number of times, but I think it's worthwhile repeating, is that stress management is not the absence of stressors.
Mm-mm.
Like nobody has that. We all have stressors in our life. That is normal. So what it is about how do you react to those stressors? That's the management part of it, not let's get rid of the stress.
Let's go live on a desert island.
How do you react to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next S.
So, yeah. Sleep.
I love sleep.
Sleep, again, sleep is your superpower. You can just, when I say sleep is your superpower, it is more complicated than, just go to bed early. But honestly, for some people, that is all they need to do. So lots of us start watching Netflix all night or half the night. Lots of us don't have good sleep practices. And so it's really about, optimizing what you can. If you have sleep apnea, wearing your CPAP machine. If you think you have sleep apnea, getting diagnosed, because by improving the quality of your sleep, that has enormous flow-on effect to your metabolic health and metabolic hormones and all your organs.
Next S, strength.
Next S.
Strength or not being sedentary. You could do either.
Yeah. 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 So, Maz, can you explain why is strength important?
It's extremely important. Our muscle is one of our most metabolically active organs, and improving your muscle strength, getting more muscle on your body benefits you in myriad ways. Like there actually is no aspect of your health that it doesn't help. But very specifically, it helps you become less insulin resistant. It helps improve the insulin signaling right down at the level of the cells, right down to the level of the subcellular structures like the mitochondria. It is a powerful medicine that helps your insulin work better. Also helps you be stronger, avoid falling, get better bones, improves your longevity, does all kinds of great things, but also really helps with that metabolic health.
Indeed. Indeed. And then if we want to sprinkle in some of the other S's, sunshine. And the reason we talk a little bit about sunshine is that humans are circadian. We are supposed to be awake in the day and asleep in the night. We're not really supposed to be up watching telly all night. Some of us have to work at night, and that's slightly unfortunate, but it's the way our society is given. So if you have the luxury of not working night shift, then we really want people to recognize that the power of morning sunlight is really helpful for lots of things. So for cortisol levels, which we've already spoken briefly about, for melatonin, again, part of our sleep hormone. And now there's even evidence that perhaps it's useful within that metabolic framework of insulin and leptin. More to come on that later. What we do know is that morning sunlight is free. It has no side effects. It's incredibly therapeutic, and all you have to do is actually get out of bed. So again, a bit like sleep. You have to go to bed.
Yeah.
But then you have to get out of bed.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right. That's it.
Yeah. And then social connection, again, probably a little, not directly related to insulin per se, but we just know that humans as a whole, we're social creatures. We know that loneliness is a marker, is a risk factor for poor health. And that social connection is not having thousands of friends or being in a crowd necessarily, but it's having just a number of deep connections, people that you feel safe with.
Yes. And that's how we can be metabolically well. So, I mean, that's good. That's all fantastic knowledge there and information. But if you feel like you're struggling with the implementation, how do you work through that?
Yeah. So implementation is always, it's a mindset. I know people's brains, our brains are funny. They all have the same stories. Our brains will say stuff like, well, I can't implement because, I'm a single mum of 2 kids, one's 10, one's 2, and I'm the sole breadwinner in the family. So I'm way too busy to do any of that.
Sounds strangely familiar. I wonder who that person is. It's me.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. So, or the story in somebody's head might be, well, it's all fine, but, I have a disability and I can't exercise and I don't have any muscle mass and I've got a family history of type 2 diabetes. So really there's I can't do any of that. That might be also someone we know.
That might be someone we know too, Lucy. Yeah.
So I think it's worth recognizing that your brain is very good at giving you reasons why you can't do things. And they're often legitimate, but we need to be able to work past those and go, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, brain, but what can I do to move past that? What can I do that's in my power? So, as you know, I'm not doing strength training. I can't do strength training. But what does that mean? Well, that means I have to be really mindful of that and go, okay, well, then I have to double down on the other S's, the sleep, the social connection. That's a fun one for me. The sunlight. Okay. And again, I don't always get that right either, but it means that I need to work out a way that I can. So the implementation comes from, it comes from your brain. So it's between your ears.
Yep. And it's the stories that you tell yourself, and you can change those, and you can change your brain. Your brain is, it's neuroplastic, to use that term. And just because you've always told yourself one story, like I'm solo mum, I can't go outside and exercise in the morning. Like I can't go to the gym in the morning. I can't go for a walk. I just can't. I have to stay in the house until my kids wake up. But, that doesn't mean that I can't, that I can't do it at other times. My time is really limited, but that doesn't mean that I still can't carve out bits of time here and there for strength training, for cooking, for stress management. I still can. And you need to focus on what you can control and pay attention to what your brain says. And you don't always have to believe your brain.
No, absolutely. And knowing that, it can sometimes take a little while to get it right. And, again, to use, as you know, we all love an analogy. I love an analogy.
Totally.
I'm the queen of analogies. But again, we look at it like gardening. Gardening, you don't plant a garden and then leave it and it just, tends to itself. It doesn't. It needs constant work, and it'll be different work in different seasons. And our lives are very much like that. So, some seasons for growth, some seasons for pruning, some seasons are for, just having a little rest. there's always going to be times where it comes and goes. You don't have to be perfect all of the time, and you don't have to do all of the things all of the time. What we need to do is most of the things most of the time.
That's it. That's what you do most of the time that counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess, this is what we do day in, day out with all of our programs, with all the people that we help, is helping them unpack the stories that are in their head, the things that are holding them back, and working out, well, what are new stories? What are new ways that we can do it? What do you need? Do you need accountability? Do you need to be telling somebody, I plan to do this, and therefore, and I want everyone to know, but not everyone. Maybe I just want a few secret people like Dr. Mary to know.
Yeah,
but that's the sort of stuff that we do. It's until you're then ready for your own self-accountability.
Yep. That's what we do with our support groups, with all of our things. Yeah. Learn to work with your beautiful brain.
Absolutely. It all comes down to metabolism and mindset. That is the formula for a happy, healthy life. Improve your metabolism, manage your mindset. Again, I know there are other things that can go on, but the two big rocks, they're it.
I love it. Metabolism, mindset, both within your control.
Excellent, lovelies. Yes. Beautiful people, if you know where we are. If you want any help from us, Momentum, our monthly membership for women, is currently open. We are taking new enrollments. We'll put the link in the show notes, but it's just rlmedicine.com/momentum, and it is your one-stop shop for all things metabolic and mindset.
That's right. Love it. See you later, gorgeous ones.
All right, beautiful peeps. We will see you next week. Bye, Zools. The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.